Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on the chassis for the Ultimate Crew Cab. Since the body is at paint, I thought this was a good time to get the chassis all lined out. I've been neglecting it since we started doing body work on the cab, but there's some work I need to do to the chassis. I need to get the 6.7 Power Stroke up to snuff and get everything lined out on that before we start assembly on it. So let's go dig into it and show you guys what I've been doing. All right, guys, like I said, the cab is at paint right now. And in that episode, I think I talked about hopefully they get that thing done pretty quick for me. Well, I kind of jumped the gun on that. I took some my door panels and stuff up there for them to blast and paint for me as well. And got to peek at the truck, and they hadn't touched it yet. That was earlier this week. And I got to talk to them, and everybody that works there, almost everybody that works there, they're off-site at a refinery job right now. So they're pretty tied up with that big money stuff, and my stuff gets kind of pushed aside, which is okay. I get it. But we might have a little bit more time to work on this thing than I thought, which is okay because I'm working on the 67 crew cab back there. That's my interim project I'm working on in between to kind of keep things rolling in the shop. But I do need to work on the chassis here. Doing some things right now, just clean up on the frame, like cleaning up some brackets I cut off. I still have to do it up here, or I cut off the front cab mount, clean those up. And I've been welding on these brackets here. I just tacked them in place when I had the bed on it. These are for the bed bolts. Since the bump side trucks are a 34-inch frame and these are a 37-inch frame, the bowl holes for the bed are not in line with the frame. So this one here, I just welded a little tab on it, and this one here, I had to shim it up a little bit, and I just welded pieces of strap iron on it, and it'll bolt the bed down. And right here, we had to do a 1/2 inch, and then on the back, it was flush. So a little bit of height difference with the hump on the frame. It's a little bit different, but that's not a big deal. It wasn't very hard at all to get taken care of once you found the specific height that it needs to be. So we have 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and then 0 on the front too. If you're doing something like this, and need to mount your bed. Also to working on here on the back, the back area here, I had to trim, I can't remember, like 4 or 5 inches of the frame off the back because it was just a little bit too wide, or too long rather. And the spare tire cross member deal was kind of a pain to figure out what to do with, because it's kind of connected with this cross member, then it came over here and I had to cut it because it got in the way. So I just cut it off there, and I said, I'll deal with it later. Well, now it's later, and I'm dealing with it. So I have this piece here. I'm going to weld it in here in place. You can see my marks there where I got to grind the paint off. I'm going to weld that in here and just weld it up here just to give it some strength back and to reinforce the shackles here, because a lot of the twisting motion on the frame is going to be right here where these are. So I didn't want to leave this just open. I considered just cutting that off, but I'd much rather have an extra brace in here where that shackle mount is. So that's what we're doing. Had to notch the pipe a little bit to clear these rivets, because I have long travel shackles I'm putting in here for the D release springs. I have custom spec D release springs from PMF Suspension. And I have their long travel shackles, so I have to remove these factory shackles and get rid of these hot rivets and in place bolts. So I had to notch this because it was getting pretty close, and I just got to have some room to get that bolt and nut in there and get a socket on it. So anyway, that's what we're dealing with now. I just about have this thing ready to go in. I got to clean up these welds. I capped the ends of this because it ended up being right where that little hole in the frame is, and I didn't want to have it was open to the tube in here, and then you can either drill holes in here to get water out of it so it doesn't hold water, or what I did is just cap the end off, and I'm going to weld that up just so hopefully nothing can get in this tube and cause issues down the road. So once I get all of this done, the welding and stuff done, I'm going to pull the engine and steam clean the chassis real good. We have a really good steam cleaner that does really good cleaning stuff like this up. And I'm going to pull the axles as well, get the frame all picked up on the forklift, and then we're going to spray the frame in Chassis Saver. I've used it in the past on frames, and it does a really good job. My Ultimate Highboy is painted in Chassis Saver, the frame on it, and it has held up great. I haven't had any complaints about that at all, but I've always brushed it on, and it always, you don't get a very good finish when you brush it on. There's always a little bit of streaks in there and stuff. They say you can thin it out to help reduce it, but I haven't had any luck getting the streaks out of it with the paintbrush, because the stuff is so thick and sticky. Your paintbrush always sticks together, and it's never, by the time you get done, it's just a little crude looking, which on something like my Ultimate Highboy, I didn't really care, because it was an off-road truck. I take it off-road, and it's always dirty. You can't see it. And this truck's going to be pretty similar. It's going to be a little bit more of a highway queen, but I do live in gravel roads, so it's going to be, every time I drive, it's going to be on gravel. So it's going to be hard to keep it exactly perfectly clean underneath here. But I'm going to spray it this time to hopefully eliminate the paint streaks, and to aid in just making it easier, because man, it gets, when you paint the whole frame with that stuff, it gets pretty old, let's just say, doing all the paint. So we're going to try it spraying it this time. I bought a paint gun just to do this, because I know that stuff is real tough and real hard to clean up. I've never been able to reuse a paintbrush, that kind of a deal. So I just bought a cheapo depot Harbor Freight paint gun, and we're going to see how it does. And we're going to do the axles in it as well. Don't know if I'm going to do that on this episode, because I still have to go through the axles and decide what rear axle I'm going to do. But we're going to try to do the frame so that it's all ready when the cab gets back. I can put it all together and take up less space in the shop with everything, because get the cab off the rotisserie, get the cab sitting on the frame, same thing the bed, and get the old frame out of the way, and we'll get the 67 cab on that rotisserie. But anyway, I'm going to start knocking out the little stuff I need to do with this frame, and we'll start cleaning it up. Well, guys, I have the engine out for the hopefully the last time.
I am going to steam clean the entire frame because there is a bunch of just like oily residue where the engine was and that kind of stuff. It's not going to help the paint situation, and to get all the dirt and grime and anything else I can get off of it off the frame and get it ready for painting. I did get the cross member in, so here's that rear cross member welded into the spare tire carrier that we're not going to be using anymore, unfortunately, because there's no room back here. The end of the trucks are shorter than the modern Super Duty, so there's not enough room for a full-size spare from using the factory mount anyway. But have everything welded up. I did a little bit of work right here to reinforce around the cab mount and ground off the old cab mount locations there. So yeah, I'm gonna get this thing cleaned up, and then we'll see about coating it, see how it goes. Well guys, as you just saw, I decided to dig into the axles on this truck and get the axles stripped down and get them ready for paint so I can paint those at the same time as the frame. Just made more sense to me. If I can't reuse that paint gun, it's going to keep me from having to buy another one. So I do have the axles in here, getting those ready. We'll talk about those in a second. I wanted to jump over here to the engine because at the beginning of the episode, I had mentioned that the engine needs a little bit of just touch-up work. It is very good shape because it was a remanufactured replacement from Ford, and it had low miles on it whenever I got it out of the wrecked truck it was in. You can see there the remanufactured, and then it also has a remanufactured transmission, but I don't know the mileage on the transmission, but at least it's been rebuilt. The ambulance that this thing came out of had 288 or 85,000 miles on it, but it also had 35,000 hours. So yeah, had a lot of time on it, but luckily the engine is pretty fresh. I think it was under 5,000 miles. It for sure under 10,000, but I think it was under 5,000 miles it had on it. So pretty good shape on the engine, but there's stuff that it doesn't come with whenever you get a reman, like alternators and stuff like that, the front drive assembly. I have a new alternator, and since it is dual alternator, I'm going to take my chances on the other one. You know, I have a backup basically, so we're going to see if it works and everything. But I do have a new one we're just putting on there. I'm putting a new power steering pump on. For one, this is likely the original. I doubt they've replaced them because they don't really give much trouble on these trucks. But also because it has this outlet here for the suction side of the pump. It is pointing right at the inner fender. So I got one out of a gas truck, like a 6.2 or a 7.3 gas engine, and the suction goes back, I think, but it'll clear the inner fender is the big thing. I'll change the pulley out because it doesn't have this as big a pulley, has a thinner pulley and a thinner drive belt, but we should be able to do that no problem. So I got a new power steering pump. I also had to get a new compressor because this one
has issues, as you can see. I don't know if that happened during the wreck. It probably did. But yeah, the clutch on this AC compressor is shot, so I got a new one of those. And stuff like that I have to do. The motor mounts as well don't come with new engines, and this one has a crack there, if you can see. So I got new motor mounts, just stuff like that. Just replacing little stuff like that. And I need to finalize the turbo kit. We put a 2015 turbo kit on this truck because it was a cab and chassis truck, so it has a smaller turbo. And I put the Ford Performance kit for a 2015 and up style pickup truck turbo. So a bigger turbo, a little bit more power, more reliable as well. Those cab and chassis turbos have some problems. And I have an H&S intake manifold on here, just clean it up so we don't have that big plastic intake manifold here. But I do need to install the S&S Performance Disaster Prevention Kit, which basically eliminates your valve here, or isolates it so that if your CP4 injection pump fails, it doesn't send metal all through your injectors, and you have to replace everything if that fails. So with that disaster prevention kit, you only have to replace the injection pump, which is pretty nice. It also allows you to get home. With these injection systems, when the CP4 fails in stock form, it goes through all of your injectors, and usually your valve back here, which regulates your rail pressure, that thing gets plugged up with metal, and then your truck just won't run. So then you're stuck. But with the S&S kit, you can at least get home even if it's failing, and replace the injection pump. Looking back now, I should have got their DCR pump, which changes out the whole injection pump completely, changes out the CP4 that's prone to failure to a more robust pump that they made work in here. I've actually installed that on my black dually truck you might have seen in the channel, where I take on buys and stuff, and it was a great kit. It just bolted right in, and I would have put this on this thing, but I already had the disaster kit bought, so they didn't have that released when I was buying parts for this thing. But we'll see how it goes. You know, I'm not going to be putting a ton of miles on this thing, so hopefully that CP4 is all right. I'm not sure what I'm doing on the transfer case right now. I initially wanted to do electronic shift, which is what this one is. It has an electric motor here, but there's a module that controls that and the locking rear end that this truck had, or that frame had. But the only problem is the computer I'm using to control this was out of the ambulance, and it was two-wheel drive, so no transfer case and no locking rear end, so it didn't have that module. So I don't have any of the wiring for that module, and the plugs that plug. I bought one off eBay, a used one, but you can't get the plugs for that wiring, that module to wire it in. So it's been a mess trying to make that work, and not even sure if I make it work, because it is part of the CAN network, which is a whole nother can of worms that has to talk to all the modules and stuff. So I don't even know if the PCM would talk to it, because it wasn't originally a full-wheel drive. I don't know if I just hooked it up. I don't know how all that stuff works, if we could tune that in or not. But I'm kind of leaning towards just getting a manual shift transfer case for this and just putting a shifter in the floor. I kind of wanted to get away from that because I'm putting bucket seats in it. I wanted the center open because I'm not putting a console in. But the floor shifter is going to make things a lot easier. So that might be what we end up doing. We'll just see. We're not to that point yet, but that's kind of the state of the engine and what it needs. But let's go to the axles. I was originally going to use the 2015 Sterling 10.5 that was on our 2015 chassis. The only problem was it was 355, and the axles I bought I needed a front axle, and I bought a pair from my buddy. The front axle 373. These are out of a 2008. The front axles are pretty much the same. The rear axles are slightly different. This one doesn't have electronic locking rear end. It's just got a limited slip. And I was kind of thinking, well, I'll just take these 373 gears and set them up in my 2015 axle. But they don't transfer over because this is a small pinion bearing axle, and the new trucks have a larger pinion bearing, so the ring and pinion sets don't transfer. So now I'm thinking we'll just use this axle. I mean, since I'm keeping or thinking about doing manual shift on the transfer case, keeping the electronic locking rear diff was kind of not as appealing then, because that control module controls that as well. You can hotwire those, but it's
It's not designed to be like a constant 12-volt power source. I think it's like pulsed or something. I don't know. It's something weird. But I know people have hot wired them. But anyway, this limited slip will work. They're not the greatest. They do wear out. You can see the clutch packs right there. This one is tight right now, so we'll see it in the future. If it wears out, I'll probably put a locker in this, a mechanical locker. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But you might have saw a little bit of rust inside this axle. Unfortunately, it was stored at the junkyard that my buddy got this from. I know the guy. Everything's stored outside, and a lot of times you find this stuff with stuff from him. I mean, his parts are cheaper, but sometimes they get water in them and stuff, and you got to deal with that. Fortunately, the ring gear is great. The pinion's great. That's the biggest thing, is there's no rust pitting on the ring and pinion. The surface rust on the carrier is not ideal, but it's we can deal with it. I did have a bunch of rust in one of the wheel hubs, which isn't bad in itself. We just got to get bearings, which luckily those bearings are pretty cheap. But we did get a bunch of stuff in here, so I'm going to have to really clean this hub out. So that's not a big deal. I'll get all this cleaned up. But the biggest thing we need to deal with is converting this hub to 8x6.5. I don't think I've told you guys yet, but my plan is to convert the Sterling 10.5 and the front Dana 60 to 8x6.5, the old school wheel pattern. I have my reasons for that. I think I'm going to fill you guys in fully on that on the episode where I do the conversion on the front axle and stuff, and tell you guys my whole plan and why I'm doing that, and how I'm making it all work. But we do have to convert these hubs to 8x6.5, and I'm unsure if I'm going to do that before I paint, or if I'm just going to paint the housing and deal with the hubs later, because that's going to be a project and a half. But for now, I'm just stripping everything down, finding everything I need, getting parts ordered so they're here, and then I'm going to end up pulling those center sections out and cleaning the housings with the steam cleaner, because it just got water in it, and that rust and stuff is just a mess. So unfortunately, we're going to have to strip it down further than I'd like, but we'll get it stripped down and cleaned up, and hopefully we'll be spraying paint here before too long. All right, guys, well, I have the axles almost ready for paint. I have the rear differential all ready for paint, other than another cleaning. When I did the getting the cover off and draining oil and stuff, we did get oil on the cover here, so we definitely have to clean that up so the paint will stick. And just generally cleaning it up, I went over it with just a Scotch-Brite pad, trying to get all the loose, flaky old paint off as much as I can. Luckily, that chassis saver stuff sticks to a lot of stuff, so as long as it's not already separated, you're pretty good. As long as it's a rough surface, they actually don't want you to remove the rust, so it has something to bite to. It's kind of interesting. You can see here I got a lot of oil and stuff on the end of this axle tube, so I'm definitely going to have to degrease that and clean it up, make sure all that oil residue is gone. On the front axle, I decided to leave the knuckles on so I could paint them better, but I am going to tape up the inner seal surface on the inside of the knuckles, and I'm going to put the cover on. I'm waiting on gaskets, and I'm going to clean the cover up and put the cover back on so I can paint the cover with it on the axle as well. Replace the track bar bushing or ball joint, because it had a little bit of play in it, and I'll have to tape that surface up so I'm not scraping paint out and stuff. But other than that, we are pretty darn close. I got to get the same thing with the frame that's outside, make sure it's all, cleaned up, go over a couple more times, and then hopefully we'll be spraying some paint here pretty quick. Well, I have everything set up for paint. I think I have the front axle hanging here. I got a lube locker gasket in, and I'm going to paint this with everything assembled, just so everything is nice and clean and fresh, instead of having to deal with bolts and stuff and painting it separate. So everything in there is cleaned up with the gasket. I'm going to paint this, and then I'm going to install the plate on the second coat after it dries, and paint the over the little ID plate that goes there. The sway bar is just there to hold this up. I kind of was struggling with a way to hold this up without using the forklift, because the forklift is holding the frame up, not using that axle. The frame here, I'm going to do paint the top and then pick it way up and then paint the bottom so I can get the bottom really good. That's why I'm using the forklift to hold it up versus just having it on some stands,
because in the past when I've tried to paint something like this on the stands, when you're trying to paint the underside, you always miss spots because you're not seeing everything clearly. And then lastly, over here I have the rear axle. It's all ready to go. I'm just going to spin it around. It's sitting on the spindles there. I'll spin it around and get all the sides there, and I'm also doing a couple of radius arms there. So I'm going to get all the paint ready to go, and we'll see how this stuff lays out. Alright guys, well we got the first coat down on all the chassis parts. It went pretty well. Once it started to dry, you can tell that there is some spots where I got a little light on the product application, but that's why we're doing 2 coats. We'll get all that taken care of on the second coat. Sorry the time lapse, the view wasn't that great. I reviewed the footage and the sun was pretty brutal and kind of blowing out the image there, but hopefully you guys can see the finish here. It's still pretty shiny. It has to dry all the way and then it'll turn a little bit more satin. This is supposed to be satin, but overall pretty good. I do like spraying the chassis saver versus brushing it a lot better. For one, it's faster, and 2, you get a much more even and uniform finish. So pretty happy with how it's turning out. I did this front axle last, so you can see it's the most shiny, has the most gloss to it. But as the product dries, it really flattens out. So it should flatten out pretty nice to a nice satin. I have the knuckles and everything assembled and the U-joints, hopefully to get a good enough coating on that, even though I'll be taking all this back apart. I left it on there so we could get all the parts kind of painted and have the sealing surfaces all covered up so we don't have to worry about getting paint application there. Like I did here, I taped up where this ball joint goes, that kind of stuff. I'm just seeing how it goes. We might chip it up, but we can touch it up as we go if I do damage it. There's the radius arms and the rear axle here. So I'm gonna go to lunch and we'll come back and do it all over again. There's like a 3 to 6 hour recoat window for the second coat. So you have to give it a pretty good amount of time to flash off and dry off.
and they have a procedure to tell you how to check for it. And they said if it's hotter, it reduces the time. So I might have a little shorter time here if we have a little bit more warmer temperatures without in the sun and stuff. So I'm going to check it, and we'll get second coat on. Well, guys, we're about 3 hours later. I'm getting ready to do the second coat. Just wanted to give you guys a little look. It kind of clouded up so you can kind of see this better, I think, hopefully in the video. But this stuff is kind of flashed off, and it lost a lot of the sheen that it had. So when this stuff dries out, it gets pretty flat. But I'm gonna get everything ready to spray it again, and we'll give this stuff a second coat. Thought I'd show you here. Here's the tag I was talking about, just the ID tag. I'm putting it on here after the second coat so we can get a coat on that as well, so it wasn't just sandblasted metal underneath that and rusted out. So we'll get that painted up as well, and we'll see how it turns out. All right, guys, this is it. We got the frame and axles completely coated. It turned out really good. I was really happy with the results with this chassis saver stuff I used. Like I said in the past, I've brushed it on, but with the spraying it on, it put a lot nicer finish on this thing. Just a real nice, clean, straight finish. It's definitely not perfect. I didn't intend for it to be perfect because, you know, like the intentions of this build are to be a driver. So, you know, not as much detail was put into this thing as like something I'm doing restoration on. But it's still, I think it turned out great for what, I mean, just homebrew, do it, you know, a couple $100 in supplies, and got the job done, and it turned out really nice. And I've had great success with this stuff in the past as far as durability goes. So pretty confident that it's going to be durable on this setup as well. There's the radius arms, pretty standard there. Here's the rear end. Now the rear end did have some rust pitting on it. You can still see it there in the tube. So it definitely didn't fill all that in and make that go away. But it made it better, made it look a lot better for sure. I didn't paint the diff cover because I have a finned aluminum diff cover we're putting on here, so this was just there to block the hole. Not painting the aluminum one, obviously. It turned out pretty good. See, there's some more of that rust pitting. You can just see the texture of it's from the surface of the metal there, but it turned out okay. The front axle is a little bit trickier to get all the nooks and crannies, because there's so many nooks and crannies in this axle, like way back up in here. So I spent a lot of time trying to get all the spots, and it was a little hard to get everything 100% coated, but I think we did a good job. I did get a little bit of a run there on the diff cover. Hopefully that doesn't bug me too much, and I won't pull the diff cover off and redo it, but I think it'll be all right. Anyway, I ended up using about 2 quarts on this. If that gives you guys an idea, if you're wanting to do something like this, 2 quarts with reducer, and sprayed it with just a cheap Harbor Freight paint gun. So it turned out good. Next step is going to be assembling the axles. Sorry about that. FedEx showed up right in the middle of filming, so I had to go get some packages. Next step is going to be assembling the axles, especially the rear axle. It's all tore apart. But something's different going to be different on these axles, and kind of hinted at it earlier on, but I guess I could fill you guys in with what's going on. It'll be the next episode on this truck, because I'm going to do a standalone episode on it, but I'm converting the axles to 8x6.5, so the old school bolt pattern. Right now they're 8x170 millimeter, so they're a metric bolt pattern. And I'm changing them to 8x6.5 so I can run a old school steel wheel, but it's going to be a 17-inch, so it clears the brakes on this front axle, because it has to have a 17-inch wheel to clear the brakes. And we're also gaining a different offset so I can move the tires inward. So it's going to be a pretty special setup with this. So we're doing a whole hub conversion. It'll have conventional bearings. It'll get rid of the unit bearing here. We'll go through all of that on the next episode, and on the rear axle we have to re-drill the hub. So we're going to be doing a lot of work on the axles, getting those 8x6.5, but I think I have everything here so we can get started on it. So that's going to be the next episode on this truck, so subscribe so you can see that if you want to see that. Give me a thumbs up if you like this build. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.